cocktail sessions, educational and inspirational talks from experienced startup founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders.
That was good. All right, so thank you guys for staying with it, staying with everything. And thanks, Frank, for starting with one of my bigger failures, which is not becoming a screenwriter. I think that's a good place to start, because actually what I was going to talk about today was the difference between success and failure, and why we fail in a lot of cases, and why we succeed, and what the difference is. So first of all, I'd like to start with a question for you guys, which is how many of you, either right now or at some point in the past, have worked on an amazing product or company that you thought was going to be really successful? Raise your hand at some point. Okay, now I'd like you to keep your hand up if that product or business succeeded the way you thought it would. Okay, all right, lots of mixed, yeah, okay, so a couple of big successes, right? Scott's got his hand up in the back, I think we know why, right? But a lot of things that we work on fail. So what I thought I'd do is tell you a little bit about one of my bigger failures as an entrepreneur, and then I'll tell you a little bit about what I do now, which is what I describe as being an intrapreneur, because I have a day job and I work for somebody else. And because of working for somebody else, I have a lot of benefit, which is I'm not spending 100% of my time doing entrepreneurial things, but I launched a product this week, and the product happened to be a book, but I learned a lot from that experience, and I'll share that with you as well. So, and I'll tell you a little bit about a couple of celebrities I met along the way. So celebrity, failure, maybe not sex or drugs, but maybe we'll sing a song afterwards and then we'll go, okay? All right, because nobody's mentioned rock and roll, right? Where's that? Where's that? There's gonna be like a rock and roll space. I can see it already, I can see it. Okay, so my huge failure, 1997, graduated from college, came back to DC, and I had a world-changing idea. And my world-changing idea in 1997 was that I was going to launch a website for the DC area that would list all the restaurants in DC so anyone could find any restaurant online. It didn't exist in 1997. There was no directory of restaurants. So I launched dcrestaurants.com. Brilliant idea, great URL. In 1997, it was available. I got it, launched this directory, and I had this brilliant idea that I would launch my business and do both sides of the market. One side would be the directory, so anybody could find restaurant websites. The only problem was a lot of restaurants didn't actually have websites. So the flip side of my business was that I would go to restaurants and build websites for them, right? So I bought myself a book, Teach Yourself HTML in a Week. And I taught myself HTML in a week, and I designed the website, design being a very loose term for what I did there, but I bought Photoshop and made it, built a directory, then I went out to restaurants door to door in Adams Morgan and in Georgetown, and I had my brochure, and I said, I can build a website for you, I will charge you $250 for your website, and it'll be the world's greatest thing, anyone can find you. And every single restaurant owner looked at that proposal and said to me, why would anyone ever look at a website for a restaurant? So, maybe I was just before my time, maybe I had the wrong timing, but I still thought this could work. I wasn't ready to give up yet. So I went to one restaurant, Miss Saigon restaurant in Georgetown, some of you might know it, and I said, I'll build your website for free, because I need somebody who I can pretend like paid me to do it. Otherwise, I have no credibility. So I'll build it for free, and you'll be one of the first on my website, on my directory. So I built a directory, and then I ended up landing a meeting with a guy who worked at AOL. And I had this amazing idea that we'd do a partnership, right? I'd learned about partnership in business school. Partnerships are good, we help each other. And I walked into this meeting, and I had my website that was proudly purple. And now I look at it and it's a disaster, but at the time I was very proud of it. And I gave him my pitch. And my pitch was, the world needs this. This is going to be great for DC. And look, I have a website that I've already built for this restaurant. Didn't mention that they didn't pay me, of course, right? Look, I've got this over here. And I gave him the whole pitch and he said, sounds like a great idea. I can really help you. I can give you lots of attention, I can drive a lot of eyeballs there, lots of people are on AOL. He said, but what are you going to do for me? What do you have to offer me? And I literally sat there with no answer. I didn't even say anything. I didn't even make up anything. I just sat there because I didn't have an answer. And I left that meeting, the worst meeting of my life, by the way. But at 22 years old, it was the best meeting I've ever had in my life because I learned a very valuable lesson at that moment, which is you never walk into a meeting without knowing what you can do for somebody else. So that was the first moment when I figured that out, and that was my biggest failure as an entrepreneur. So I packed up my bags, left, and moved to Australia. That's that 1 week training course, the book about how to teach yourself how to do HTML. I ended up building myself a website. And I said, you know what, I'm going to stand out, 1998. I'm going to make my entire resume a website. I'll just build it myself. I won't have a resume. Somebody asks me for a resume, I'll say, here's the URL, check it out. So that's what I did. I moved to Australia. I lived in a hostel, ate peanut butter sandwiches for 2 meals a day, and then went to a Chinese buffet for $5. That was my model for 3 weeks straight. Sucked, but it saved money. And I ended up landing a gig doing a 3-week coding job in HTML at a big South African company. That was my first big break, doing HTML coding. Now I knew I wasn't going to do that, but the way I landed that gig was because I took the opportunity that I had, not the opportunity I wanted. That was also a big moment for me because I realized that if I was going to wait around for the exact perfect thing, I never would have gotten my shot to break into the industry. And once I broke into the industry, that was it. I was in. Because most industries that you'll find, no matter what industry you work in, they're small communities and people know each other. And once you're in, you're in. And I had this moment where we were in the dot-com boom in Australia, and our company grew from 20 people to 6 months later having 217 people in 6 months. And then 6 months later, we fired 150 people. So it was literally like a huge spike, and then, this was like the spike of the dot-com boom to the extreme. And what ended up happening was we literally had this one day when everybody got fired and they all had to turn in their laptops. And so they took their laptop bags off, they put their laptops near the front entrance, and they left. 150 people, so imagine 150 laptops piled up. And you only had 30 people left, and nobody's job was to clean up these laptops. So for 6 months, there was this Nazi book pile of laptops, and nobody could do anything about it because we were all trying to finish all of our work. It was just this reminder of all these people who had left. And then eventually we all got fired. First time in my life that I've been fired. In Australia, they have a brilliant word for it. They call it a retrenchment, which is such a nice way of saying, sorry, no job for you. So, fired, left, traveled around Asia for 3 months. The benefit, by the way, if you ever happen to work for, I know I'm talking to an audience of entrepreneurs, but if you ever happen to work for a big company where a lot of people get laid off at once, the absolute best thing you can do, and tell any of your friends if they work at HP or any one of these big companies that they all got fired at once, go on a vacation for 3 months. Right? Because not only will it get your mind off of what happened, but all of your colleagues will find jobs. And then you can go to them and say, hey, are there any other jobs? Which is basically what I did. So when I came back from my trip, I got a job in 24 hours because they all were happily employed elsewhere. Right? And I didn't have a wife or kids or anything that I had to worry about, so I could do that no problem. Right? So that was the first moment also when I realized the power of relationships in a fortuitous way. Right? Because all of these personal relationships that I had of people that I had worked with, maybe they had worked for me, maybe they were just work colleagues, but now they were in a hiring situation and I ended up getting a job from that. So now fast forward, 2007, I moved back to, actually, sorry, not 2007, 2003, I moved back to America, I'm back to DC. 2007, I go to South by Southwest, very cool event, lots of you went. This was my second year that I went. And I get an email from a random guy who I've never heard of. And he says, let's meet for breakfast. I want to pick your brain about some marketing ideas. I don't know who he is, but I say yes. So I show up to breakfast. It's at that Hilton right across from the main convention center. For you that have been to Austin, have breakfast with this guy. Figured I'm going to talk to him for half an hour and then go and rush and see one of the keynotes. We end up talking for more than an hour. Great ideas. Turns out he's launching a book and he wanted my advice to talk about that. 2 months later, he launches his book. immediately it rockets to be #1 on the bestseller list. The guy's name was Tim Ferriss. That was the first moment before the 4-Hour Workweek launched. That was also an important moment for me because I realized that you never know where someone is going to go because you can only see them where they are. And for Tim Ferriss, he wasn't Tim Ferriss at that point. He was just a guy with t-shirt and jeans who had an idea for a book that got turned down by 27 publishers. And so that was an interesting moment too, but a few months after that, he's successful. I have an idea for my own book, but I don't know where to start. So I say, how did you get your book deal? 27 publishers rejected you, you must have done something right. And he told me, he said, what I figured out about the publishing industry, and for any of you who aspire to write a book, you'll get lots of useful stuff from my talk today because I've spent a lot of time figuring out how the publishing industry works. But I think it applies to any kind of startups for products as well, so it's not just about books. He told me, he said, the publishing industry is a big network, and if you get in touch with the right people, then you'll succeed in the publishing industry. And for him as a no-name author, and I was going to be a no-name author too, right? Because all I had was a marketing blog and no books. You had to get the right agent. So he introduced me to his literary agent. And I pitched the agent to let me pay him to represent me. Because what I've found also in a number of different industries is if you're going to work with the best people, and if you're going to actually pay them to work with you, right? You're not trying to get them to pay you. You're trying to sell yourself as a client so that you can pay them. But in order to do that, you've got to be able to have enough of a pitch so that they want to take you as a client. So that's what I had to do. Ended up pitching the agent, got the agent, and then it was a matter of a couple of weeks and a 10-page PowerPoint before we sold my first book deal to McGraw-Hill. So that was for Personality Not Included. The book came out in 2008. Did pretty well, got 9 translations. You know, it was a relatively good book. But before I launched, I knew that I also had another big challenge, which is nobody had still heard of me except for a small community of marketing bloggers. And that wasn't going to be enough to sell a book. So I needed a forward by somebody who people would recognize. I needed an endorser, right? And if you're thinking about launching a product, you're probably thinking through this challenge for yourself, which is who is the famous person that I'm going to get to use my product so that it legitimizes it for everyone else, right? Who are the early adopters that I need to get before what I'm working on will be really accepted? So for me, I targeted Guy Kawasaki. He was the guy I wanted. Literally the guy I wanted, right? And so there was a presentation contest about 3 months before I had to find the person writing the foreword. Presentation contest on SlideShare, and Guy was one of the judges. So I said, well, I don't want to just email him out of the blue. I want him to have heard of me first, so that when I do ask him for the foreword, I can refer back to something. So I created a presentation that was designed for one purpose only, and it was so that Guy Kawasaki would have heard of me. It wasn't to win the contest, it was so that he would have heard of me. Right. Now, I did end up getting like a 3rd or 4th place or something like that, so which meant he had to have looked at it and voted for it. 3 months later, I sent him an email and I said, "Hey, Guy, remember me? I'm the one who put that presentation together and was in the presentation contest," and sent me back a very nice email, and he said, "No." And I said, "Well, I've got this book idea, and I'd really love to send you the book to try it out and to read it because I'm a big admirer of your work, and I think that you would really enjoy it, and I really want you to write the foreword." And he sent me back an email and said, "I don't do forwards." And he spelled forwards FWDS. So didn't even take the time to write forwards like it's a full word, right? He's optimizing his time with email. Which I get, that's fine. But I persisted. I sent him another email. I said, "Look, let me just send you the first couple chapters by PDF. If you don't like it after that, you'll never hear from me again." Sent me back another email, 2 letters, "Okay." I'll take it. You know, it's email. He's a busy guy. It's fine. So I sent him the first 2 chapters, waited 3 weeks. Then I get an email back from him at like 2 in the morning. Actually, it was 2 in the morning for us, but he's on the West Coast, so it wasn't that bad. And he says, "When do you need it by?" That was all he said. To which I responded within 30 seconds, "Whenever you can do it is when I need it by. I'll move my entire schedule for whenever you can do it." So kind of final point on that is he ended up doing the foreword for the first book. his name was co-listed with mine. If you know anything about the publishing industry, you know that endorsements are important, but if someone writes a foreword for you, the way that the book is listed on Amazon, it sort of looks like they're a co-author. That's just the way that their system reads the book. So by having him do the foreword, not only would I have a really recognizable name and an amazing person writing a foreword for the book that was a great endorsement, but when someone searches for his name on Amazon, my book shows up along with his books, which is great from a search optimization point of view, right? So that was that story. Moving forward to this book, Likeonomics, it was all about this idea that you've heard about today, which is the power of relationships, and why relationships make such a difference to the opportunities that we get. And I've seen this over and over, whether it's a guy taking a 3-week coding gig in HTML and then turning it into a job that lasted for 4 years, or getting Guy Kawasaki to endorse my book. But now I was moving to the next level, and I spent 4 years doing a lot of favors for people, being a blogger, going to conferences, speaking to people, talking to startups, talking to lots of you guys, trying to help you wherever I can. And I didn't really have something to sell, right? Because this was where the big company piece came in, right? As a guy who works at Ogilvy, my customer is the big brand. So I could afford to go to a lot of smaller events and not have to sell something to somebody because I didn't have something to sell. I don't have my own product, and I can't really sell you on hiring Ogilvy because it's too expensive. So I can go to events like that and just be there and just help people, which was a great benefit for me, because to do that for 4 years, you build up a lot of goodwill. So now I get to the point where I'm getting ready to launch Likeonomics. I have the same challenge, right? Do I need somebody to write a foreword? This time around, I've built up enough of a brand. I feel like I have enough of a presence. I don't really think I need a foreword. But I do need good endorsements. So I'm thinking through endorsements, and my ultimate person to get an endorsement from was Richard Branson. So I had Richard Branson set in my sights. So I go to a bunch of different events. I'm thinking, how am I going to meet Richard Branson or convince him? Right? Because I got Guy Kawasaki, so now maybe I can figure out some way to get Richard Branson. And while I'm doing that, I go to a 140 conference. Some of you know Jeff Pulver, who organizes these 140 conferences. Great guy, yep. And while I'm there, I'm standing in the hallway and I'm getting ready to speak, and I'm just talking, if you have any sort of ethnicity in your background, you'll realize this fact. But I was outside, and there were like 20 people, but there was one other Indian person, and we just kind of looked at each other, and then we had to talk to each other, right? Because brown people talk to brown people. It's just like a rule. We don't exclusively talk to each other, but we saw each other, and we're like, oh, you must do something interesting. Let's talk. Maybe we're related. We don't know, right? So I start talking to her, and she tells me about her business, and it's kind of an interesting, cool website, and she's in this mode where she's getting ready to launch a website. And so, I've done tons of website launches in my career. I say, hey, I'll take a look at it, I'll help you, I'll do everything I can. So we exchange cards. I don't really think that much about it. I go and I speak at the event, great event. A couple weeks later, she gets back in touch. She says, hey, we're at a point where we're looking at, should we kind of launch this version of the site or this version? I could love to have some advice. Could you maybe check out some of this stuff? Could we do a Skype call? So I say yes. We chat, and I try and help her as much as I can. During that chat, I uncover something interesting about her background, which is that her website is all about people becoming more spiritual. It's called intent.com. Her name is Malika Chopra, and some of you might know her. And her dad is Deepak Chopra, the spiritual guru that is Lady Gaga's most influential person in her life that you might have seen in the media. So that's how Deepak Chopra is the cover endorsement for Likeonomics, because I made a personal connection with his daughter. And now she helped me to put the book in front of him and his people. He said, yeah, it looks really interesting, and he did a cover endorsement. So now I have an Onomics book, but I have a spiritual guy on the cover that everybody knows, and everybody recognizes, and a lot of people respect. Really big deal for me as an author. So last story that I'll tell you, and then I'll open it up to questions, was launch week, which was this week. So the way the publishing industry works is very much like how the Hollywood film industry works, which is you need to get a lot of buzz in a very short time. You only have a week in Hollywood. Depending on how your film opens, it either gets carried by theaters or it doesn't. Books are exactly the same way. Wall Street Journal, New York Times lists, they're all reported on a weekly basis. And this is my week. This is my big week. This is why I've been in St. Louis and New York and doing all kinds of media and basically kind of working 24 hours a day for this week. The New York Times and Wall Street Journal report on a weekly basis, but Amazon updates its sales rank for books hourly. How many people knew that? Okay, a couple of people. So on Amazon, in order to rank really highly, you need to have a lot of sales in 1 hour. Not in 1 day, not in 1 week. You have to have literally a very big hour to try and get momentum. So sales rank on Amazon is the primary metric that authors use to see whether they're doing good stuff or not, or their book isn't doing well. Last week, my book was hovering around the 60,000 mark. Lower numbers are better, right? So the lower you get, the better your book is selling. So 60,000 is okay. I mean, literally, there's millions of books sold on Amazon. So 60,000 means there's 60,000 books selling better than me, and there's more than 1 million selling worse. So it's not awful, but it's not very high. So I started to get buzz. I had a book excerpt in the Huffington Post. I had a Fast Company, some good media. I was on a CBS morning show for the Facebook IPO on Friday. So I had some good buzz. By the time the 23rd, when's the 23rd? Yesterday, right? Yeah, by the time yesterday rolled around, which was official launch day, my book was at 6,000. So it went from 60,000 to 6,000. So pretty good. But in order to really get buzz, you need to get into the top 5,000 at least. Under 2,000 is really good because then you start ranking for categories. So when you get under 2,000, you start getting to like number 10 in the marketing category, for example. So when you see that against a book, that's how people kind of look at a book and say, okay, it's getting buzz because it's good in a particular category. So then I launched the promotion and I said, I'm going to have the big hour. That's my promotion. And for 1 hour, I'm going to try and drive everybody who I know in my whole network, I'm going to ask them for a huge favor. I'm going to say, I really need your help. There's 1 big hour. I'm going to give away a bunch of free content. I'm going to do a drawing for a free Kindle. But at the bottom of it all is, I need your help. We've met at some point, maybe we've connected. I haven't really asked you for very much. It's not like I do this every week, but this is a really big week for me. I really need your help. So I sent out emails, I posted it on Facebook, I did it on Twitter, and it was from noon until 1 p.m. Ran the big hour promotion from noon until 1 p.m. Then I extended it for another hour because I had some email glitches and also because, why wouldn't you, right? You want to keep the buzz going. Gave away a second Kindle. And the numbers were a little bit behind because Amazon doesn't update them in real time. So I saw myself moving from 6,000, went to 5,000. I'm like, oh, this is pretty good. And then I broke 5,000. It was really exciting. Right? Because you can really, that's the worst thing about launching a book. You check this ranking all the time. You just can't help it. And so I got to 4,174. And I was like, yes, this is awesome. This is really good. And then I thought the promotion was over because I did my 2 hours, I was done. And then I went back an hour later and I looked at the ranking and it was 737. I said, whoa, I just broke 1,000. Never expected to get there. Then I went back an hour later and I was at 311. And that was the high point. That was where the book hit. And because it hit 311 yesterday, it ranked number 1 in global marketing, it ranked number 1 in consulting, ranked number 1 in travel and tourism, ranked number 1 in motivation, ranked number 9 on bestsellers, movers and shakers on Amazon. So as soon as it started ranking for all those categories, random people who I didn't know started finding it. And that's how you get buzz. Because my network can only take me so far, right? It'll take me to the first level, but how do you get beyond that? How do you get to the next thing? And that is the challenge with any product, right? You're only going to get to a certain level with the people that you directly know or you directly influence. Then you need momentum, right? It's the kite philosophy of marketing, right? You can put a kite up, but then you need wind. Otherwise, it's not going to go anywhere. And that was really what needed to happen. So that's what happened yesterday. Now the book's still rolling. I'm trying to do all the bulk sales and everything like that. So it's still a work in progress. Next week, I'll do a blog post about the entire process, and I'll sort of take everybody who cares, behind exactly what I did, why I did it, how I spread it out, what the different pieces were, and how I put them all together. And hopefully it'll be useful, not just for people who are launching a book, but also people who are thinking about launching products. So, wanted to tell you a little bit about some of the powers of those relationships, what I did specifically to launch a product this week. Happy to take any questions. I know that probably was slightly long, but hopefully interesting for you guys. And thank you so much for listening to me and sticking around.